Shalom, Yasharal. Peace and blessings to all out there in search for truth and wisdom and knowledge. Today, I want to talk about the topic of uh, the language of Aramaic and Hebrew, and are they the same? And which one did Christ speak? Because scholars will today, any biblical scholar will tell you that Christ, the Messiah, that he spoke Aramaic, and that after the captivity of Babylon, that the Israelites, the Jews, no longer spoke Hebrew, that Hebrew had become a dead language after Babylon, and that Aramaic took its place, or replaced it. So to debunk all the lies, all the myths concerning Aramaic and Hebrew, Lord willing, we're going to debunk that today using scripture and biblical sources. Before I begin, I want to give all praises to the Most High and Yehoshua for bestowing upon us this knowledge and grace, sharpening our swords to fight against the wiles of the devil. By Hashem Yehoshua, Amen. Alright, now I'm going to begin in the account of Genesis, just to give an overlay of everything. Okay, so this is Genesis 11 and verse 1. And the whole earth was of one language, of one tongue, and of one speech. And this is during the time of Nimrod. And Nimrod had made a decree, Nimrod the Cushite had made a decree that all nations come to Babylon and build a tower to the heavens to fight against the Most High. And the Most High sent his angels down and split the tongues and confounded the languages, or confounded the language, which I'm going to prove to you was Hebrew. That was the language all people were speaking at one point in time. And afterward, the angels had split the tongues, and this is where you get these different languages, these different dialects and everything. It's all from this event that took place in ancient Babylon. And I'll begin here. Genesis 10 and 21. Unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber. Now I'm going to touch upon this verse right here. The brother of Japheth, the elder, even to him were children born. The children of Shem, Elam, Asher, and Arphaxad, and Lud, and Aram. Now Aram, that's where you get the term Aramaic, Armenian. This is where it comes from. Aram, he was the father of the Armenian or Aramaic people and language. Verse 23, and the children of Aram, Uz and Ahul, and Gether and Mash, and Arphaxad begat Salah, and Salah begat Eber. Now you see here that Salah was the father of Eber. But if you jump up to verse 21, it tells you, unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber. Now, I'm going to explain why this is. Because Eber is where you get the term Hebrew from. This is where Hebrew derives from, Eber. Because Eber was the forefather that held on to the tongue. And I'm going to explain. Verse 25, and unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg. Now Peleg means to divide or division. For in his days was the earth divided. And his brother's name was Joktan. So you see, during the time of Peleg, the tongues were split, not only by tribes, but by language as well. And Eber held on to the tongue, to the Hebrew tongue, because all nations, all people were speaking Hebrew at one point in time. and later on the languages had split, and you got different tongues, dialects, and nations speaking different languages. All right. So Eber, it's Strong's H. You can find it Strong's H5674, and scholars have put properly a region across, against, beyond, by, from, over, passage, quarter, other, this, side, straight. Now this is what scholars say, but Eber is originally where the term Hebrew comes from. So this all goes back to Genesis 10 during the Tower of Babel. All right. And Aram, the highland, Aram or Syria, and its inhabitants. Also the name of the son of Shem, a grandson of Nahor, and of an Israelite. Aram, Mesopotamia, Syria or Syrians. Okay, so Aram is synonymous with Syria or Syrians. So during this lesson, you're going to hear me say Syria and Syrian a lot. So this is the two words, Aram and Syria. They're the same. They're synonymous with each other, just so you don't get confused later on. Now this is the map of ancient Israel. Now, during the split, after the two kingdoms had split. Now this is the province, or the area where Aram and his descendants had dwelt. You see, it's in northern Israel or Syria, the Syrian people, Aram. And you see above it the Assyrian Empire. Now, the Assyrian Empire would later go on and capture the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes, and bring them into captivity. And they also, along with them, they brought the kingdom of Aram, the Armenians, the Syrians, into captivity as well. And they had adopted their language, because one thing about the Assyrians is they had a form of writing and linguistics that was different. It was called cuneiform, and it had over 600 characters, versus the Syrians language, which was derived from the Hebrew, which had 22 characters. So it was easier to adapt, easier to speak, and easier for other nations to trade with Assyria when they had adopted Aramaic or Assyrian. And not only the Assyrian Empire had adopted Aramaic, but the Babylonian, the Persian, and other ancient empires as well, because Aramaic was an easy language to learn as well as Hebrew, you see. So just some history, some background behind that. But I'm going to tell you that I'm going to show you rather that Hebrew and Aramaic are two distinctly different languages. Salakia, I'm getting organized. Okay. Now this is Genesis 31 and 44. Now therefore, come thou. Now this is during the time of Jacob and Rebekah. And Rebekah was the mother of Jacob, and also the sister to Laban. And in the account of Genesis, it tells you that Laban was Assyrian. So he had Assyrian, he spoke Aramaic. So that must mean that Rebekah as well spoke Aramaic. But Rebekah grew up in the house of Isaac. So she learned from the Hebrews as well as the Syrians. So she adopted both languages. She probably spoke both Aramaic and Hebrew. But to continue. Now therefore, come now, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. So Laban is about to give off his two daughters, Rachel and Leah, to Jacob, and they're making a covenant together. Verse 45, and Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. And Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. And Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Galid. Now you're going to see that these two words are the same thing. They are the same thing. But one is speaking it in Hebrew and the other in Aramaic. Okay. Right here. Jegar Sahadutha. You see, a witness heap. A witness heap. Now this is what Laban called it. Now let's get what Jacob called it. Galid. A witness heap, the same thing. So they're both saying the same thing, but Jacob said it in Hebrew and Laban said it in Aramaic. So this dispels the lie or the myth that Aramaic and Hebrew are the same language. And it further distinguishes the two, that they're separate languages, separate tongues. Okay? And just to expound on that, this is during the Second Kings. This is during the time of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria. This guy right here. Alright? And Sennacherib, during this time, he was invading Lachish. And he's the one that took the northern 10 tribes into captivity to Assyria. Alright? So he sent his servant Rabshakeh down to Judah to capture it, but he had failed. But continue on that. And now this is 2 Kings 18:25. Am I now come up without the Lord against this place to destroy it? The Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. So he's talking mad jump to the Israelites, to the Jews right now. You know, he's boasting. Verse 26. Then said Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and Shebna, and Joab, unto Rabshakeh, speak, I pray thee, to thy servants in the Syrian language, for we understand it, and talk not with us in the Jews' language. So it's right here you see clearly a distinction between Syrian, Aramaic, and the Jews' language, which is Hebrew. So right here, it's distinguishing the two. They're not the same. Alright? And talk not with us in the Jews' language in the ears of the people that are on the wall. But Rabshakeh said unto them, Hath my master sent me to thy master, and to thee to speak these words? Hath he not sent me to the men which sit on the wall? Because the men on the wall didn't understand Aramaic, but Eliakim, these two Jews, they understood both Hebrew and Aramaic. So you see, they were skilled in that area. But Rabshakeh said unto them, Hath my master sent me to thy master, and to thee to speak these words? Hath he not sent me to the men which sit on the wall, that they may eat their own dung and drink their own piss with you? So he's still talking mad junk. mad junk against the Israelites. But later on, Sennacherib, he gets his butt kicked, really. He gets his ass handed to him. And he carries himself back to Assyria. And his two sons actually execute, they kill him. So, that was judgment of the Most High, really. Verse 28. Then Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language, Hebrew, and spake, saying, Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. So this is just giving you a better distinction between the two languages, that they're not the same language. They're not the same language. Now during the time, fast forward it, during the time of Babylon, during the time of Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, that even during the time of Babylon, there was still a distinction between Syrian, Aramaic, and Hebrew. This is Daniel 2 and 4. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, which is Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. All right, and I want to get that in Hebrew. All right. Now this is Daniel 2 and 4 in Hebrew. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac. You see right here, Syriac, Aramaic, which is Aramaic. This is what the Babylonians were speaking, Aramaic, because they adopted it after the Assyrians. All right. Get that in the Strongs real quick. Right here, H762, Aramaic, in the Syrian language, tongue, in Syriac. So this is Aramaic, the Syrian language. All right, to further it up even more, during the time of the Persians and the Medes, because the Persians adopted Aramaic. All these nations, these ancient nations, adopted Aramaic because it was easy to adapt and easy to speak versus their language. Even though they had their own language, they spoke Aramaic because it was more flexible of a language to deal with and to trade with. This is Esdras 4 and 7. In the days of Artaxerxes wrote Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabil, and the rest of their companions unto Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And the writing of the letter was written in the Syrian tongue, Aramaic tongue, and interpreted in the Syrian tongue, the Aramaic tongue. And that word Syrian would be right here, H762, Aramaic. That would be the word that was used. Okay? Because some history behind what was going on during this time. The other nations were getting jealous that the Jews were building up the temple again, and they wanted to join in and build the temple with us. And we told them no. We said we want to build up our own temple. This is our temple. We don't want heathens building the temple with us. And they got mad, sent a decree, sent a letter to the king Artaxerxes at this time, and told him that that the Jews were planning some invasion, and that they wouldn't pay taxes to the king, and they were feeling salty, really. So they actually stopped us from building the temple for a couple of years, but it got completed eventually. But during that time, actually, after this is during the time of the Persians, but before, like I mentioned, Sennacherib had brought the 10 tribes into captivity into Assyria, and he would later replace those 10 tribes with heathens in the land of Samaria. Just to get that real quick. This is 2 Kings. Okay. I'm gonna start at the 22nd verse. 2 Kings 17 and 22. For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They departed not from them, until Yahuwah removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, and from Cutha, and from Ava, and from Hamath, and from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. So heathens were occupying Samaria, and fast forward even up until the time of Christ. And that's why there was so much controversy about the Samaritan woman. But she was actually an Ephraimite. You know, she was an Israelite. And that's why Christ went there. But to get back onto topic, this is Esther 8 and 9. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews. Now, this again is during the time of the Persian and the Mede captivity, and there was a decree sent out to the king that Amalekite, an Agite, Haman, that the Jews should be executed. But later on, this would, you know, turn on his own head, and this is where you get, if you read on further on in the chapter, this is where Purim is institution is given as a holy day. And this is where Purim comes from. Mordecai commanded unto all the Jews and to the lieutenants and the deputies and rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, 127 provinces. So a letter was sent out to all the king's provinces, 127 of them, and to every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language. So every province got a letter in their own language. And to the Jews according to their writing, and according to their language. So Hebrew, which was the Jews' language in their writing. That was the letter sent to them. Alright. Right. Now, to fast forward, that I'm going to even prove to you that the Hebrew text, the New Testament, was originally written in the Hebrew. Now, scholars will debate about this all day, but this is a fragment from the early church fathers, pre-Nicene Council. Before the Nicene Council, Constantine and all that went on, these were the apostles, the early apostles that, now these are some of the apostles that learned under the apostle John. So these were his disciples, actually, that learned under him. So I'm going to pull this up real quick. Now this is called the fragment of Papias. He was a direct disciple of John the Apostle. This is what is related by Papias regarding Mark. But with regard to Matthew, he has made the following statements. Matthew put together the oracles of the Lord in the Hebrew language, and each one interpreted them as best as he could. So originally the Gospels were written in Hebrew, but later on had been translated into the Greek. All right, so that tells you that even way after the time of Christ, well, during just a few years after the time of Christ, that they were still speaking Hebrew, that Hebrew had not become a dead language, as scholars would like to tell you. All right. Uh, Now, to get some quotes from Paul, because that is where Christians will run to the quickest. All right. This is Acts 21 and 40. Now we know that Paul was a Hebrew. He was a Jew from the tribe of Benjamin, and he spoke both Greek and Hebrew. All right. Acts 21 and 40. And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with the hand unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying, Men, brethren, and fathers, hear ye my defense which I make unto you. And when they heard that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silence. So even Paul, during and after the time of Christ, Hebrew was still a functioning language. It was still active. It had not died, as scholars will like to tell you. All right? And even Christ spoke Hebrew. He was a Hebrew. He's from the tribe of Judah. Why would he speak any other language but Hebrew? All right? Acts 26 and 14. And when we were all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me and saying in the Hebrew tongue. The Hebrew tongue. Now some will say that this was translated falsely, that this isn't really Hebrew. But you can look this word up in the Greek. And in the Greek, it'll give you this. Greek 1446. Hebraeus. The Hebraistic Hebrew or Jewish Chaldee language. Hebrew. So that is the word used in Acts 26:14 and Acts 22:1 and Acts 21 and 40. Hebraeus. And when we were fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me and saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. Now this is red. This is Christ speaking in the Hebrew. So that cuts it that Christ spoke Aramaic. He didn't speak Aramaic. All right. Now this is all to edify the body, edify Israel, and you know it goes to show that scholars will mess up anything really. They don't know what they're talking about. You know, the only way to prove things is if you go into scripture, not believe man. You know. But this is a prologue from Sirach. Because if Christ spoke any other language, I mean, he was the Hebrew. Like, why? I mean, Christ, I don't doubt. I mean, Christ was probably trilingual. He spoke Greek, he spoke Hebrew, and he probably did speak Aramaic. But his mother tongue was Hebrew, that he spoke most often, as well as Paul and the apostles. But this is a prologue from Sirach. Wherefore, let me entreat you to read it with favor and attention, and to pardon us, wherein we may seem to come short of some words, which we have labored to interpret. For the same things uttered in Hebrew and translated into another tongue have not the same force in them, and not only these things, but the law itself, and the prophets, and the rest of the books have no small difference when they are spoken in their own language. So if Christ was trying to reach the Hebrews, why would he speak to them in Aramaic? You know, Hebrew was still an active language. So he spoke to his people in his language, Hebrew. you know. And this is all really just to edify the body, edify Israel, and to come back to our culture, our roots, our own language, and I know we don't have the pure tongue, but the Hebrew that we do have, we can still work with. And a lot of brothers really, they bash on other brothers for, oh, you're not speaking correctly, you're not speaking the right Hebrew, what's his name, but we don't have the true full name. We don't have the true full pure tongue yet until Messiah returns. But the Hebrew that we do have, because we did fall from our heritage, our culture, and our language. Jeremiah 17 verse 4. But to actually come back to our own culture that's a great thing, and we shouldn't take that for granted and bash another brother because he speaks this way, he speaks that way. I mean, you even had that during the ancient times. The northern kingdom couldn't speak a certain way as the southern kingdom, but they still operated, but eventually they split, but just some scriptures to back that up. This is Zephaniah 3 verse 9. For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of Yahuwah to serve him with one consent. And you see, we don't have that pure tongue yet, because we're all calling on different names right now. One may say Yahuwah, one may say Yahweh, we're all mixed up and we don't have the pure tongue yet. So brothers out there striving and teaching the Hebrew language, I commend you for that. And it's great to come back to our own culture and our own way of life that we fell from. But another scripture, because it's prophecy that some brothers would hold on to the language, and that it would be revived in these last days, but we won't have the exact pure tongue, is what I'm trying to get at. We're not going to have the exact tongue, the pure tongue, until the Messiah comes and reveals his true name to his servants, to his elect. But this is Isaiah 19 and 18. In that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan, which is Hebrew, and swear to Yahuwah of hosts, one shall be called the city of destruction. Exactly. And that's what's happening now. We're awakening back to our culture, our roots, and our way of life that we fell from as a people. And with all that being said, I'd like to say shalom and peace. Kwame Asharala.
Alright, I want to touch back up on the lesson I was just on Aramaic and Hebrew. And that, just to clarify that Christ himself, even was quadruple lingual, probably. He spoke Hebrew, being his mother tongue, and he spoke Greek, and as well as probably Aramaic and other languages. I mean, it would help him during his ministry and other things, as well as the time period he was living in. And it was a common thing for people to learn different languages during this time, But I want to grab some external sources other than the Bible to prove that Hebrew had not become a dead language and was still viable and still thriving, even in the 1st century and after. And I want to touch up in the Josephus, the historian, during the time of the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. But I forget where it's quoted that the Jews, that they said the Jews would rather eat swine's flesh than to learn and speak Greek, which we know that swine's flesh is unclean and abomination. So that just goes to show you how much they still respected and carried the Hebrew language, it hadn't become a dead language, as scholars will like to tell you. Let's see here. Josephus himself will tell you. Alright. This is Josephus, Book 20, Chapter 12, Antiquities of the Jews. Alright. For those of mine own nation freely acknowledge that I far exceed them in the learning belonging to the Jews. I have also taken a great deal of pains to obtain the learning of the Greeks and understand the elements of the Greek language, because he was among the Greeks, the Romans, during this time. Although I have so long accustomed myself to speak our own tongue, Hebrew, that I cannot pronounce Greek with sufficient exactness, for our nation does not encourage those that learn the languages of many nations, and so adorn their discourses with the smoothness of their periods. So you weren't looked upon as smarter or more intelligent if you learned another language. It was just a common thing. And so adorn their discourses with the smoothness of their periods, because they look upon this sort of accomplishment as common. So it was a common thing, even during Josephus's times, that learning another language, it was common. For trade, for anything really, it was a common thing. Not only to all sorts of free men, but to as many of the servants as pleased to learn them. So even the servants, the slaves, handmaids, they even learned. They even were bilingual, trilingual. They held on to another language. So it was a common thing amongst all the people. But they give him the testimony of being a wise man, who is fully acquainted with our laws and is able to interpret their meaning. So you weren't seen as wise if you learned another language. You were seen as wise if you could learn the law, the commandments, and interpret the law. That was considered a wise man back in Josephus's day. All right. So just to iterate on that Hebrew was still being used even after the time of Christ. All right. And Josephus himself will tell you that he spoke Hebrew. Alright. This is Wars of the Jews, chapter 9. Book 5, chapter 9. Alright, this is this is when Vespasian and Titus were about to destroy the temple. They were already finished going through the first wall, and they were basically telling the Jews to surrender and to give up. They were giving them a chance to surrender, but knowing our people, we went hard. Don't think we were weak, because we went hard back in the day, back in ancient times. So all right. But then Titus, knowing that the city would be either saved or destroyed for himself, did not only proceed earnestly in the siege, but did not omit to have the Jews exhorted to repentance. So he mixed good counsel with his works for the siege, and being sensible that exhortations are frequently more effectual than arms, he persuaded them to surrender the city. So he was using psychology, basically, saying, surrender the city and no one will get hurt, blah, 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 blah. Now in a manner already taken, and thereby to save themselves, and sent Josephus to speak to them in their own language. So Titus sent Josephus, a Jew, to go speak to the Jews in Hebrew, for he imagined that they might yield to the persuasion of a countryman of their own. Now, if you don't believe that Josephus was speaking the Hebrew, I'll get further on in the chapter. Upon this, Josephus stood in such a place where he might be heard, not by John only, but by many more, and then declared to them what Caesar had given him in charge, and this in the Hebrew language. So he earnestly prayed them to spare their own city and to prevent that fire that was ready to seize upon the temple, and to offer their usual sacrifices to God therein. So even Josephus, 70 AD, was still holding on to the Hebrew language. So that tells you that Hebrew had not become a dead language. Aramaic did not replace Hebrew. It was still active, still working language. And, and furthermore, just to distinguish the two, Antiquities of the Jews, Book 12, Chapter 2. Now this is during the time of Alexander the Greek and Ptolemy, when he sent his generals out. They went out different cities, different countries, taking all our records, and not just our records, but other nations' records, and buying them and keeping them for themselves, and also destroying records. Because that's what the Greeks do. They destroy other nations' records and also take them on as their own. Okay, so right here, when Alexander had reigned 12 years, and after him Ptolemy Satir 40 years, Philadelphus then took the kingdom of Egypt and held it 40 years within one. He procured the law to be interpreted. So this is when the Septuagint had first been translated from the Hebrew into the Greek. This is where it first happened. And set free those that were come from Jerusalem into Egypt and were in slavery there, who were 120,000. The occasion was this: Demetrius Phalereus, who was library keeper to the king, was now endeavoring, if it were possible, to gather together all the books that were in the habitable earth. So they were buying all the books, not just our records, but all nations' records, and buying whatsoever was anywhere valuable or agreeable to the king's inclination, who was very earnestly set upon collecting of books, to which inclination of his Demetrius was zealously subservient. And when once Ptolemy asked him how many 10,000s of books he had collected, he replied that he had already about 20 times 10,000. 20 times 10,000. 20,000 books they collected. But that in a little time he should have 50 times 10,000. But he said he had been informed that there were many books of laws among the Jews worthy of inquiring after, and worthy of the king's library, but which, being written in characters and in a dialect, of their own, will cause no small pains in getting them translated into the Greek tongue. So they're saying, it's not going to be hard for them to translate, because they were under captivity to the Greeks. That the character in which they are written seems to be like to that which is the proper character of the Syrians, and that it sounds when pronounced is like to theirs also. So they're saying it's like, that it wasn't the same, that they're like each other, and that this sound appears to be peculiar to themselves. Wherefore he said that nothing hindered why they might not get these books to be translated also. For while nothing is wanting that is necessary for that purpose, we may have their books also in this library. So Josephus writes that that Syrian was peculiar to their language. And I want to get the word peculiar out of the Webster's dictionary real quick. Peculiar. Right here. Odd or unusual, unique, characteristic of a particular person, group, etc. So it's basically telling you that the Syrian language was odd or unique to the Hebrew language. Alright? So they weren't the same. So, that further goes to prove that Hebrew and Aramaic are two different languages. But I want to bring out this right here. This is the Aramaic and Hebrew translation of the New Testament. Alright? And even in the Hebrew translation of this, I'm going to show you that even during Christ's time, Hebrew was still active. It wasn't just used to write in scrolls and write religious texts. It was used, throughout the community. And you see, one side is in Aramaic, one side is in Hebrew. This is Luke 23 and 30. Lamed Het. Alright. I'm not too fluent in Hebrew or Aramaic either, but I'm going to translate this the best I can. Wahayata, and this also, khitab, khitabit, writing, khitab, and this writing written, me'alo, I don't know what that means. I don't know what me'alo means. Yavanin, Greek. And this writing written, khitabah, writing written also in Greek by Yavanit wa Baromit, Roman, and Roman or Latin, wa ba Ibrit, Hebrew, Ibrit, which is Hebrew. So that even it goes to show that Hebrew was the inscription on the cross that Christ was crucified, because that's the language that the Jews dispersed and in Judea were speaking during that time. Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. Now, if it was Aramaic, it would have said Aramith, or Syriac. That's what would be here. But instead, it says Ibrit or Ibrit, Hebrew. Okay. Hua. This is Melech, king. Melech Ha Yehudim, king of the Jews. Alright, so this is Luke 23 and 38 in the Hebrew translation of the Aramaic Hebrew New Testament. Alright, and that even it shows you here that Hebrew was on the one of the languages was on the cross was Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. So that cuts out that Aramaic, So this is for the edification of the Israelites, edification of God's people, Wake up in these last days. Come back to your heritage. And, Shalom. Kwam Yasharala. Peace.